The main thing I want to talk about with you all today and share is really around AI prompting. Prompting being this term, it's a verb of how you really interact with AI. We've seen as we've been experimenting and using AI at the county over the past, really 3 years since generative AI really became a thing, is really around like some of the themes we saw today. Yeah, we use it, but I don't really trust it, or I have to really verify, getting mixed results out of using this as a tool. I want to use it more, but I don't really trust it yet and still dabbling. And what myself and along with other power users in the county have really coalesced around is really how we prompt and how we interface with this tool really impacts its ability to be a value add in our professional life, in our personal life, and in how we use it to deliver services. So with that, let's see if I can. So I want to go over here some of the Lunchable results here. And I realized about an hour ago, I should have changed the theme of this whole slide deck to be like the Lunchables from when you were kids. But anyway, I want to be able to kind of help provide sort of the current landscape of AI, particularly in government, but also just in public sector in general, using sort of the county really as a use case for some broader trends that are going on there. I want to make sure everyone has like a foundational understanding of AI as a tool, where it came from, how it really works in the back end. I'm not going to get super technical. I have a master's in public administration. I'm not a software engineer, but I'm going to try to do my best to speak to some of the technical aspects of it. And then we'll get into some of the best practices of prompting. And then if we have time, could really go into some use cases for AI going beyond just drafting emails, beyond just kind of doing the basics and doing some show and tell on some interesting tools and techniques that are out there that you may want to deploy in your own workflows. Okay. So where we are and where we came from. So November 2022, 3 years ago, this month, OpenAI released ChatGPT-3, which was the first really commercially available generative AI model, and it was a bit of a bomb, pardon the violent reference, around of a technology leap in technological innovation that had been growing for a long time, and it was really the first use of a wide scale sort of generative model. The county's reaction to that is we got together very quickly. Members of the county executive office, our IT department, which we call information services, as well as our personnel department, now HR, came together and really we need to at least put together an appropriate use policy for how we're going to use these tools, because this is not a flash in the pan. This is going to be here to stay. This is a transformational technology. We need to be able to have a policy for how best to use AI in lieu of having more strict guidelines. We started small, a small amount of county staff when we pulled county staff back in September. About 10 months later, after the first models came out, we saw there was about 100 active users, regular users within the county. That represents, 2,400 employees, 5-ish% or so, maybe a little bit more of the county workforce, regularly using AI at the time. A lot of it was just experimentation. Our IT department was experimenting with pilot projects and, lackluster, very in its infancy of development there. The county, and this is something that would good for our community partners, is maybe something, a model that you can take with you if you don't have, is really we put out some principles within our appropriate use policy about how to use these tools responsibly. Won't go into all of them, but essentially is use common sense, be responsible, take accountability for it. The information you get out of an AI tool, right, is something you need to own. You can't just say, oh, the AI said so. That's not where we're at. Have some guardrails of bias, check, have all of our data privacy and security protocols in place there. So really just this is some foundational stuff. And I'm not going to really speak to this too much later on, but just know that this exists here really as a launching point for really using these tools in more sophisticated ways. where the county is today. And again, I think this is a reflection of a broader trend in the public sector at all. And I'll skip this one a little bit, but I really want to show that we went from about 300 active users to now we have over 1,800 active users in the county, right? That's a 6x fold in the amount of folks who are using AI on a regular basis. We have different projects that are picking up steam. We're really becoming more sophisticated and growing into a place where we're going to be deploying more enterprise-wide and AI solutions. You can see here the growth again over time, again of the amount of sessions, the amount of times people logged in and used the system. 30,000 a month back in September of 23 to now August of 25. Almost 200,000 unique sessions in a particular month. That's not bringing up. Pie chart there, which is not displaying correctly, kind of shows just some different use cases of what people are using using AI for. A lot of it is around drafting documents, research, summarizing notes, and that type of work. A few months ago, our office, the CEO's office, we did I would call it a vibe check, an AI vibe check with our departments here. I want to just offer this as a framework, both for folks within the county and folks outside the county, as well as we kind of really evaluated how departments were using them as using AI as an organization. How aware are they of how employees were using these tools? How technical are they getting? Are they using it for really basic tasks? Are they using it for really complex tasks? Are there mechanisms in place for quality control for information coming out of the system? Are they recognizing opportunities for innovation by using AI? And how frequently, how often are folks really engaged with using AI? So, and we found some interesting sort of threads as we interviewed different departments. Guardrails are emerging but inconsistent. External influences can influence how we use it. So some state laws or federal law. There's clearly some efficiency gains, and opportunities to be more efficient, both from a data perspective and from a work perspective. And some cultural questions, what's the value of a person when everything can be automated, right? Some, more existential, part of that. A few people that might want to unplug the whole thing, may be asking about, right? So again, all things to keep in mind, something we want to offer as we sort of level set in this topic. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears. So if we talk more about how the county is using AI and how broader trends are going on, I want to talk just a bit about what AI is in general, because it is a broad term, right? AI is really a broad category of technology, anything that tries to mimic human intelligence. AI itself is not new. AI has been around in various applications for many years, many decades, like going back pretty far here. For the past few years, this idea of what's called machine learning, which is in a subset of AI emerged, right? Which goes beyond just a general if this then that type of programming, right? So if initial AI was around just if this happens then do this instructions, is very simplistic, rudimentary. Machine learning came in and became a place where computers began to start learning patterns and data recognition instead of things being programmed sort of step by step. So you begin to see that in things like predictive text, on your phone, or spell check, right? Those are some of the easiest, most basic uses of things like machine learning. Machine learning then gets, as we've continued to evolve these technologies, became what called deep learning models as well, which is basically if machine learning is a two-dimensional Sudoku puzzle, deep learning is a three-dimensional Rubik's Cube, right? In sophistication, and how we recognize patterns using different neural networks, different paths to get to an answer, recognizing just more, again, complex patterns there. What we all now experience in AI when we use ChatGPT, or we use Claude, or use Gemini, different commercial AI products out there, is called generative AI, right? So that's really what we're currently speaking to today. And it's important to kind of know the difference between these different models as you use them, and kind of understand kind of the why behind them. Because generative AI really takes those foundations of neural networking, pattern recognition statistics and uses it to actually create content that you ask it to create. And it's not just about predicting or classifying information, right? It's about generating something new that's never been generated before based on being trained on these different pattern recognition technologies. So, and what powers all of this are things that you probably heard it all throughout is large language models. That's really the engine that powers these things. It's really where you take a deep learning model and you just stuff it with as much information as you possibly can to be able to generate all sorts of a wide berth of content to create. So again, the non-technical version of how AI has evolved over the years, and I'm trying to give everyone just a basic kind of understanding of what we're talking about. Okay, so now that we know how AI works, we're going to know what to do with it, right? And so we're kind of getting into the meat of my talk here today, which is around how to be a prompting pro. So again, as I talked about early on, AI prompting is the exercise in how you actually engage with an AI tool, particularly in this case, like a chatbot. So, by a show of hands here, I can see most of you here, and who's used ChatGPT or who's heard of it. Okay. Anyone got Claude? Any Claude fans in the house? Couple. All right, great. Yeah. Any Gemini folks? Anyone who's got in the Google ecosystem? They're using. I know Darlene's done a few here as well, and there's others out there as well. So in that space, anyone who's pulled up a chat or a Claude, there's a basic text box, and you just get typing, asking it questions, or asking it to do a thing or anything really, and the ability to get useful outputs out of a model really comes for how well you ask it to do a task, do something. So we like to say, the clearer the direction we give a model, the better the results. Because again, it's basing its outputs based on all of these patterns that it's learned to recognize and all of human information that's been stuffed into this thing, right? And if we don't prompt well, we will get suboptimal outputs out of it. And it might not seem useful, you might not trust it. You've heard of things like hallucinations, where it will just make something up, because it'll just make something up if you don't give it proper instructions on what to do. So some of the big do's and don'ts, and I'll bounce back and forth, right? So, the first thing is be specific and contextual, right? Provide purpose, audience, tone. I always like to say, treat AI like me 15 years ago, right? Fresh out of college, a lot of energy, wanting to do whatever you want me to do, but I have like no direction, right? And no guardrails. So like, be specific in what you want this tool to do. Define your format, your output. I need something that is a bullet list. I need an essay. I need a slide deck, right? Feel free to just dictate the exact thing that you need at the end of the day. So we don't want to be vague, right? Just, give me an essay on a thing. We don't want to skip context as well. You will get better results the more information or background information that the tool has to work with there. What you do want to do is ask for verification. We'll talk more about that in a little bit, but ask to verify where it's getting its information from, right? Having that back and forth there. Don't overload the prompt. Again, if AI, as it currently exists, is a first-year analyst or an intern fresh out of college, you don't want to overload them with a whole bunch of tasks right off the bat, right? Think of ways of collaborating with an AI tool to break something down into more manageable chunks, and then work sort of step by step, so not to overload there. Again, so that goes into using iteration is a good way for quality control, because if we use a tool and we have a back and forth step by step, you can begin to evaluate if an AI tool is really giving you what you want or not in a smaller chunk without having it generate a whole thing, and then you have to read and check a huge policy document or other type of analysis there. When you break it into smaller chunks, you can see if it's gone astray earlier on and fix it more on the front end there. And lastly, don't stop after the first draft. It's usually not the best at that first one. It's pretty good, but it can be better. And just focus on iteration. We'll talk more about what it means to iterate and using AI and different prompting. So those, again, do's and don'ts. And so those things to keep in your mind as we talk more about specific structures and techniques. Okay, let's talk structure. You can do any Google search or even ask a chatbot itself around what's the best prompt structure to use. And it'll give you this sort of generic formula. It varies, here or there, but in my use cases that I've done and in talking with other peers who have really been occupying this space of really leaning into using AI for professional uses, I can really boil it down to sort of like this sort of key sort of 6 sort of elements of a good prompt, right? and I've broken it down even more around what I think is really critical to have in a prompt and what is really helpful to have in a prompt. And the interesting thing too is also this is scalable. So if you need a simple output, you may not need all 6 of these things. But if you need something more complex or more polished, you're going to want to include as much of this as possible. So we're going to roll through this kind of one by one, starting with role. As I've really leaned into this space and gotten a lot of experience in using AI and in talking with a lot of peers in the similar boat, assigning a role to an AI on the front end dramatically improves the output that you get out of using AI. And so what do I mean by a role? That is saying literally in the chat function, you are a county executive office analyst. You are a public information officer. You are a CEO. Acting as a elected official, giving it a role helps narrow, again, that huge neural network that these models are built off of. It narrows it to a very specific path and reduces sort of creative drifting away. It influences tone, it influences content, and it influences just general outputs when you give the AI a role and identity right off the bat when you're doing a prompt. Next thing seems obvious, but we always want to touch on it is the task at hand. What is the goal you're trying to achieve when you're using AI? I need a staff report. I need a financial analysis. I need 10 ideas, for a new social media campaign, whatever it may be in your specific use cases, but you want to be very specific of what you're trying to achieve. And if possible, break that into smaller pieces to get you there. And we'll talk more about how to do that here in a minute. But again, so we have the role. I'm acting as an analyst. But my task is to write a staff report on a regional radio system. You roll on your way. And then the context behind the task is also very critical. And by context, that is, any sort of background information needed to know includes like data sources. So uploading, whether it's financial information, performance information, any sort of data that you can possibly think of, knowing what your audience is, who's going to be receiving this type of information that you're trying to generate. Here, other considerations, and the key one, and I stole this from a keynote speaker from a GovAI coalition meeting a few weeks ago, hosted by the city of San Jose, which is really the value that we as humans interacting with these machines is situational awareness. Like you, at the end of the day, have the situational awareness of what's going on in the real world, and the more that you can communicate what's going on in that situation, the better the prompt output is going to be. So those 3 things are critical: role, task, context. Right? If you can just remember those 3 things, that's the only thing you take away from today, you're well on your way. Right? Things that are helpful as you get more complex and deeper into using AI are things like guardrails, formatting, and examples. So guardrails are basically anything you don't want the AI to do, right? Don't make up sources, right? Watch out for specific biases. Like those are real parts of your prompt that you can build into it to ensure that it has those guardrails there. Telling an AI, a generative AI model, what not to do is a pretty powerful technique in getting quality outputs out of that system. Next is format. This is really helpful. It's really a time saver here because dictating length, style, structure of what you need out of the system just really helps. So you're not just getting a huge batch of information out of AI, and now you've got to go make it nice. You can actually tell AI to make it nice in the first place. Do you need checklists? Do you need things in a table? Do you need things in a paragraph? Do you need to export it as a specific file format? Does it need to be a Word doc, a PDF, an Excel doc, right? It can do those things, right? So formatting is really helpful. It's a really great way to build in some shortcuts in using these models because it'll go a long way in that post-processing phase of your work. And lastly is examples. So providing examples from other similar outputs. Like for my use cases, sometimes it's older staff reports to the board of supervisors, or other policy documents that I want to mimic, and it really does help the AI again recognize the patterns in those examples and then provide an output that is in a similar fashion to what you do before. So it seems obvious, but providing examples is a really powerful way of getting quality information out of the tool. All right, so again, critical things: role, task, context, really, really helpful things, having guardrails, format, and examples. And what's obvious in there too, particularly around examples, is we're not uploading information that's sensitive, right? And you're staying true to our whether use policies and other types of data security practices that need to be in place. So. Okay, if a prompt is how you interact, one-on-one with an AI tool, a prompting session is really just what it is. It's a session. It's an iterative back and forth with AI in your daily work or personal life. And these are really just some techniques in taking that prompting structure and modifying it in a way that you're having a back and forth and using AI really as a work partner, as a really enthusiastic intern in getting the outputs that you need. And I found that these techniques to be really, really, really powerful in making sure I'm getting quality work products out of the system. So the first one, and I'll say that again, these are all really powerful, but one of my favorite things to do is asking the AI if it gets it. Do you understand the assignment here? So that's going through, and as I give it a role, as I give it the task I'm trying to achieve, as I'm giving it data and other context, instead of saying go produce whatever I need it to produce, I ask it first, what do you understand about this task? And what additional information would be helpful for you being the AI? And you'd be surprised how often I catch AI not interpreting my instructions totally correctly, and I get a chance to correct it before I get too far down a rabbit hole that is trying to drive me down. So again, asking for understanding, flagging, and being able to flag where it got it wrong and correcting it on the front end really, really, really elevates the quality of the product you get at the end of working with an AI session. As an example, I was loading some county budget information and experimenting with how it could help summarize that budget information into sort of a fiscal narrative. And I asked it to understand if it understood this huge, massive amount of Excel financial information that I into it, and it had misinterpreted that a county department was an expense type. I was like, no, an accounting department is a county department. Expense type is this other thing up here. And by correcting that on the front end, it saved a whole bunch of time in its output there. So really, really powerful there. As I've talked about before, this will be like the third time I've mentioned it. breaking large, complex work down into steps. And you can try to do that yourself by saying, first we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna do that, and that. Or I ask my AI friend to provide me a set of steps that you are going to do to accomplish this work. So it gives me a work plan before we actually start generating content related to the task I'm trying to achieve, right? And I can then modify that approach by giving it feedback. Or I can say, okay, let's go step by step and then say to execute that first step and let's see what it comes up with and iterate from there. Okay, that looks good. Now let's go to the next step, right? And then let's just stitch it all together at the end, right? So you can use this as a tool within and of itself to help break down and iterate complex tasks into smaller chunks just by asking it to do so again at the front end. On the back end of, as you're going through sessions and you feel like you've got something that's worthwhile using, whether good or bad, AI doesn't have an ego. So you can ask it to double check itself and to see if it got something wrong. And so asking for double checks for any made up facts or figures, cite your sources. You know, what inputs did you use to get to this conclusion, right? Are ways that you can quiz and challenge an AI session, an AI tool to validate itself, all right? And to see if there's any cracks in how it put together whatever output you're working with here. So really, really powerful. I've caught several times where it will it fully admits, because again, it doesn't have an ego. Oh, I made this up. I don't know where this came from. And then you can flag for it and then say, okay, well, we need to take that out, or we need to correct it, or go research for it. Again, not a substitute for human review. We have to, like, I'll say that, you know, I know our assistant county executive officer is on this call, and she's the first one to tell me, did you look at this too before you gave it to me? And yeah, so it's, again, not a substitute, but it's a helpful technique in flagging areas that might be more problematic than others. And then lastly, just as a way to help polish, is really about challenging perspectives, right? And what's interesting, an interesting technique in using AI is if you're working on something and you really want to understand different perspectives, ideas, or lenses to view an issue through, you can ask for different outputs. So provide me an output that's skeptical, one that's optimistic about an idea, or how would a risk-adverse organization react to this or idea? Or I have a challenging work relationship. What are some ideas to walk me through a challenging situation, you know, or conversation? So ways of challenging perspectives, both within the outputs of the tool itself or challenging your own perspectives. What are some ways in which I may be not viewing this full issue the way I should be, right? So again, all techniques is as you're using these sessions and as you're using your prompts to sprinkle these techniques, these phrasings into your prompts to really help polish your outputs. So with that, as Sven said, I don't want to just talk at you guys all day long, though I could, because I love this stuff. But we wanted to give you a chance to do an exercise here on your own. So we came up with like a very kind of basic scenario just to kind of put some of that in practice. So what I'd like you all to do is there's a scenario here around your organization, your accounting department, or whether you're one of our community partners is doing a public announcement around a new partnership to advance climate resiliency in your region. There's some information there. Your task is to write a prompt to generate a press release related to this scenario, and feel free to get creative, you know, and tailor it to your own organization. Things I want you to do in here is really think about what the AI needs to know about this task in order to get a quality result. Go ahead and draft a prompt that you can come up with, and you can either do that on your own off to the side. If you want to open up a ChatGPT or a Claude window off to the side, you can do that. Feel free to. And if we have time, maybe we'll, you know, grab a few examples, maybe test them live. I've got some, you know, I have my own response already, ready to rock and roll, so we can just maybe deconstruct mine. So I'm gonna turn it over to you guys. Maybe take a beat here. We'll maybe discuss about, what are some of your ways that you would handle this assignment. So from there, we'll put some, 3 to 5 minutes on the clock.
Yeah, I think feel free to paste your prompt in the chat. That might be the easiest way to do it, and we might be able to read like the first couple. Uh,
Good call.
there are no wrong prompts, so don't feel don't feel like there's anything riding on your prompt. It's not going to be part of the official prompt record. But we'd love to see some of the things that folks wrote. Um, looks like we're getting a couple.
Thanks.
I could chime in. Sven and Ryan, this is Casey Conway. I wrote I think a lot of what other people said too, but I added a couple little like guardrails and things like that. Like I said, keep it to one page, make it readable at the fifth grade level, and include an explanation of why climate resiliency is important. Just give it extra like some extra advice.
Yeah, that's a great approach. Particularly I really like the keep it readable approach. A similar fashion. I've done one where like explain this like they're an eighth grader. So I kind of keep it at that level there, or maybe a 10th grader or a college student. As another technique.
Yeah, like highly scientific language or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so understanding length. We don't want to be too long, so keep it to a page or a certain word count. Is a helpful guardrail to keep in place.
There's an interesting comment from Renee about typing the same prompt into ChatGPT and Gemini and receiving different replies.
Totally. Yes, they have. They all have their different, their different calibrations within their neural networks and have slightly different data that they've been trained against. So you'll get variations. You hear a lot about personalities between the different models. Absolutely. And a way to combat that again is giving whatever model we're using a role, right? That really does help with that variation between different models. It's because I'm seeing ones where like my organization is preparing to do things, and great start. Define that organization and define who you want to be in that, who you want that AI bot to be in that organization, where it will really help fine tune the output there.
And just to add to that, Ryan, AIs are not deterministic. So even if you ask the same AI the same exact question, you will get a different answer each time you ask the same one. And that's just how the models are built.
Yeah, it's going to rerun that neural pathway, sort of the same, each time. There's going to be slight variations each time. Good point, George. Here's what I came up with. I like to keep things a little more structured when I do things. So I will say your role and task and really break it down as more of an outline that I feed into the chat here. So you'll see, I try to touch each of them as best I could. One thing here I put in the guardrails: don't invent additional partners, programs, or stats, and don't dramatize. Try to keep things factual and specific. Here's our context as well, and then I just in red here, just like what is the most generic way I could possibly do this, and I won't make everyone read the whole thing, but here's the output I got is significantly different. One is more structured. It followed my instructions more closely aligned. It kept things, direct, not too high, not too low, versus, the output on the red, several hallucinations, just the tone of it. So it's kind of all over the place. Again, you can go back and read this. We'll post this presentation for everyone after the call, and you kind of go compare and contrast the two, but you'll see it's just significantly different quality when based on how we prompted. Okay. Okay, so I'm just do a time check here, Sven. How are we doing here?
We're about at time. If we want to give folks another 10 minutes to be able to get to the rest of their afternoon. But
Yeah.
I think there's been some, just based on the interest, I think having a follow-up session on this in the new year would be a good idea. Yeah, so any questions and things people can obviously put in the chat. We will post this recording and distribute the slide deck to everyone when it's ready, probably before Thanksgiving. So you'll have access to it. And then we'll think about additional sessions that we might be able to run in this series in 2026 that can hopefully help us add and deepen the conversation we're having here. So with that, yeah, thank you all for being in attendance today. We'll hang around a little bit longer for folks that do want to stay and ask some questions. But for folks that don't, that's the end of our session, and hope you have a good rest of your day, good weekend, good Thanksgiving, and we will hopefully see some of you at our next Lunchable result in December.
Thanks a lot. See you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. That was a lot of fun.